Welcome to the Two Sons podcast. It's Bane Day, finally.
Bane Day, baby.
It's been a couple of years since
It's always
we've been
Bane
doing...
Day. Let's be real.
Oh yeah, it is always Bane Day on
Yeah.
the Two Sons podcast.
Yeah.
We're
Baneanites.
We've
Baneists.
done Banus. I think Baneists is the way to go.
Yeah.
We started this podcast when the Obi-Wan show came out, which I want to say was 2 summers ago, if I remember correctly, because I think... Or has it been 1 summer? I'm not sure, but we've done like 70
I think it's
episodes.
Less than a year and a half.
You think it's been less than a year and a half?
I think so.
I'm going to have to look this up. I can't even remember.
I think we hit our anniversary like really not long ago.
Really?
Yeah, because I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like 70 episodes in a year is pretty good.
Did Obi-Wan come out last summer?
Well,
you know what? I know for a fact it did.
Yeah.
It did, because we were recording it at your house.
Yeah, Two Sons started in my house.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
So okay, we've been doing this for a while, but from the very beginning when we started doing Obi-Wan, we would constantly make these references to Darth Bane.
Yeah.
And Darth Bane is a deeply important Star Wars character on a bunch of different levels. First of all, he's canonized. Although the actual Darth Bane books have not been canonized, but Darth Bane is a real character. Mm-hmm. In the Star Wars canon universe that has been specifically credited with the generation of the Rule of Two. And the Darth Bane books do a really good job of explaining basically how that whole thing went down. And so we're Star Wars nut jobs, as you know. This time that we reread Bane, this is the 4th time that I have read this particular book.
This is my second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to be familiar with it.
I actually read it and then the audiobooks. I gather so much more information from the audiobooks than I do reading. Apparently, I don't know how to read.
Dude, it works like that for me too. It just mentally engages me better.
Right.
And it kind of clicks with the way that I multitask too. So yeah, we highly recommend listening to the audiobooks. Our goal for these episodes, so today we're going to be doing it's called Path of Destruction, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering the first Bane book. And our goal, we're going to talk about the book and all the concepts, but we're going to also give like a loose outline of what happens in the book.
Right.
So like if you strictly just don't have time to read Darth Bane, you can listen to this podcast, which is going to be less than an hour, and you can effectively know what happens in Darth Bane. And
Darth Bane for dummies.
Connection. Darth Bane for dummies.
We'll help you navigate the world of Bane.
Yes.
And you're going to like it.
Because our crazy asses have listened to it 6 times combined.
Yeah,
so
we're Baneists, which is super weird because Bane is incredibly evil, and I'm not really a support evil type guy, but here we are.
You've done your best to. But here's the thing: if you can handle Darth Bane, you can handle Game of Thrones.
Dude, no, you're
which
totally
is why
right.
We need
I
to
was
get you
thinking
into
about
Game of Thrones.
Darth Bane is dark.
Darth Bane is
dark.
Really dark.
It is like if I would be concerned if people heard me listening to Darth Bane and if I was like by myself. Like if someone like walked into a room and I was listening to Darth Bane on the speakers, they'd be like, "Luke, are you okay?" Like,
oh dude, yeah.
What are you listening to? You know, like it's that dark.
It's not just dark in terms of violence, it's dark in terms of worldview. It's like it deeply dives into the Sith worldview. And like the Sith worldview is super ruthless and
very efficient.
Yes, and we're going to dive into that concept here in a little bit. I will say Drew Karpyshyn, who is the author, he also is one of the primary writers who conceptualized the Mass Effect universe, which is one of my favorite video games sagas ever. And like he has a style which is really easy to read.
Right.
It's super linear. Like he doesn't bounce around a ton. He bounces around when he has to, but not a ton. And he stays on any specific storyline for a long time. He's not overly descriptive of environments and things like that. He just is descriptive of, like, it's one of the things I appreciate about Drew Karpyshyn's style is he always gives the perspective of both characters.
Yes.
So there will be like a scene where 2 characters are talking in a room. Mm-hmm. And I'll get like the best examples in this book, the conversations between Githany and Bane. They have these conversations and it'll be like narrated from Bane's point of view.
Right.
And then it'll like be narrated from Githany's point of view. And then it'll be narrated from Bane's point of view. And it kind of allows you to kind of like see each character's motivations, which is cool.
Another great example, which we'll talk about more, is when Bane is talking to the Sith Lords. And Bane he like talks about what he's thinking and what he's not saying aloud, and that's like the most important part of the conversation is the stuff that's not said.
Yeah.
So like the way that he goes about these conversations, like he paints a picture with feelings and thought rather than like physical landscapes, which is super cool.
Which I like. So I highly recommend reading the books if you can, but if you can't, listen to this podcast, you'll get the gist of it. I want to start with like the actual with essentially like the situation in the galaxy.
Okay.
So like essentially this is what they refer to as the new Sith Wars, which and that's what they refer to them as in this era. And basically what's happening is the Sith have united under one banner. And it used to be that Sith were all over the galaxy as masters and apprentices.
Just doing things.
Yeah, so there'd be thousands of them. They would be always working not in concert, and like you'd hear all these like ancient Sith would be like, oh, this ancient Sith Lord, of Naga Sadow gets cut down by two of his peers,
his lesser peers.
Yeah, his lesser peers, and essentially the Sith were constantly undercut. So. Lord Khan is his name, essentially reorganizes the Sith as equals under one banner called the Brotherhood of Sith.
The Brotherhood of Darkness.
The Brotherhood of Darkness, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The Brotherhood of Darkness. And they essentially then wage war on the galaxy. And they
have like Sith minions and like proper legions of regular people that are fighting underneath the Sith banner, like against the Republic, whom have essentially not hired, but who have hired the help of the Jedi, who aren't of the Republic, but they like the Jedi are for the Republic. It's
at this point the
complicated.
Jedi are not under oversight by the Senate at all. They kind of work in concert with the Senate, but it's not until after this war ends that they actually essentially join the structure that becomes what you see in the Phantom Menace. But like basically. It's kind of like an interesting kind of like twisted world where the Jedi militarize and become this entity called the Army of Light. And they're led by this guy named Lord Hoth, who's like becoming kind of like a little close to the dark side in his attitude because he's just broken down by war.
Right.
And like he's lost his buddies and he hates the Sith so much and all this stuff.
Yeah, I think he literally says that he hates the Sith.
Yes, exactly. And whereas like the dark side in the Brotherhood of Darkness has become this weird perversion of the Sith where like we're all equals and we're in this together, which literally can't work. So like both
which is
sides,
essentially the essence of the book.
And so they all end up, there's all this intergalactic conflict, but they all end up on Ruusan in this like basically a stalemate. Where the two entities, the Army of Light and the Brotherhood of Darkness, are constantly having victories and defeats against each other,
massive losses,
gaining no ground, huge losses. The Brotherhood of Darkness is getting weirder and weirder in terms of getting like kind of acting like Jedi, and like Khan is like constantly trying to keep the group together and fighting together, whereas the Army of Light is kind of fracturing under this weird dark side energy that Lord Hoth is bringing to the situation. So that's kind of the situation in the galaxy, right?
Yeah.
And our main character is Darth Bane, right? He goes by Dez or Dessel.
Yep.
And he's on this planet called Apatros, and he's in the mines. And he's working in the mines because his dad has been in debt to this company called Oro for a really long time. And he essentially lives this awful existence where he's just going to the mines every day and then going to the bar and getting drunk and gambling every night. And it's like, and it's just not.
And then
going
occasionally
well.
getting in like a mine fight.
Just a good old fashioned mine fight.
Yeah, or like they'll just beat the shit out of each other and then go get fixed up and then head back to the mines the next day.
Yeah, and so his dad basically blames him for all of the issues that take place in his life.
Right, and his dad's an alcoholic.
And his dad's an alcoholic and is just perpetuating their situation worse and worse by getting into more and more debt. And like Bane is like this mountain of a man, like because he's been holding a hydraulic jack his whole life. They put him at like 2 meters tall. It actually comes out to about 6'3", basically. So imagine him as like 6'3", just like built like crazy. He's bald from the mine chemicals having destroyed all of his hair follicles.
Like chemotherapy.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
He's living this completely messed up life.
Right, but he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
So like, and what's like super interesting is as you're reading through this and you're like, man, Bane has a tough life. You feel bad for Bane, and he actually has like really solid qualities about him.
He's an honorable man.
Yeah.
And basically he ends up getting into a gambling fight with a New Republic soldier, and when he's walking back to the barracks, the New Republic soldiers jump him, and he ends up killing one.
Correct.
And in it, he identifies this connection he has to the Force, right? But he doesn't know what it is. He just has these special abilities. In a mind fight, he's able to anticipate an action. When he's gambling, he ends up winning because he can anticipate what's going to, he's playing Sabacc and he can anticipate what's going to happen. And then in the fight in the alleyway, he anticipates he literally says he could see the blade in pitch black that someone was trying to stab him with. It was like illuminated because of his Force sensitivity. So he's clearly very strong in the Force, but he screws up and kills this guy, and he ends up using the bartender who's a buddy of him to get accepted into the Sith military.
Yeah. So the bartender has friends on the Republic side. He has friends on the Sith side. He's very neutral. And then he knows that Bane's in trouble and obviously can't go to the Republic side. So he's like, Bane, I'm going to help you out. I can call in the Sith, but you're going to have to devote your life into being a soldier. Right. So then Bane's like, well, I've got nothing else to live for. Let's get off this rock. And he does, which goes into the next part. And Bane becomes this powerhouse of a soldier. Right.
Yeah. And what was kind of cool, too, is like they do a good job of explaining the shortcomings of the Republic during that scene, because like basically Bane would never want to join the Republic to become a soldier, because if he did, he'd first have to go serve a prison sentence for killing this soldier, right? They would transfer your debts. So like literally whatever you owed this mining company, you would go be a soldier and they would literally draw on your income until you paid off your debts.
Sounds great.
So they're like overly committed to rules, essentially, is the point. Whereas like the Sith is like, it's like, join us and like we're gonna let you get away with whatever you've done in your past, and you're not gonna owe anybody any money. Like you're just gonna come and be happy as a Sith. And so like they're as a Sith soldier, I should say, like literally as a grunt soldier. And so you kind of see why it made sense for Bane to join that route. And then also, this is an Outer Rim world, and they do a good job of explaining that like Bane has this whole argument with this soldier in the cantina, where he's basically like, the New Republic is basically like a bunch of rich people in the core worlds that are taking advantage of the people, and basically it's essentially
tale as old as time.
It's a concept of imperialism, essentially, is what he's saying. Like the Republic is taking advantage of these less fortunate worlds that are on the fringes of the galaxy to take advantage of their resources,
right? Benefiting from their ore, and then yet the people who are obtaining it have terrible lives.
Exactly, and then they kind of explain how. But the Republic takes a moral high ground in these conversations, and like there's a captain or one of the leaders who's at the gambling table with Dez, and they get into kind of like a philosophical debate about it, and he basically is like trying to provide this like, the Sith are evil, we're trying to protect the galaxy, blah, blah, blah. And then Dez is like, what the hell have you guys done for us?
Right.
Like, you guys have done jack shit, nothing for us, And so you kind of like Drew Karpyshyn just does an amazing job of explaining like why Bane feels the way he does about the Republic and about,
and he does it
quickly.
Situation. It's like super effective communication, right? Yeah. So then, long story short, Bane does great in the as like an army, not a general. He's just kind of like
he's a second in command. He's like a lieutenant beneath Ulabor, who's the commander or the captain of the unit.
And so he's given orders that he knows are going to fail. So then he essentially creates like a little bit of a mutiny in order to save himself and his soldiers, whom he loves dearly. Like that's part of like good guy Bane. So then he ends up punching his general in the face and knocking him out, and then taking over as command for a short while in order to have a successful like raid on this like Republic camp, let's say.
Yeah, specifically the captain was too scared. They were the unit on the ground, and they had intel that knew if they attacked, they would get slaughtered.
Yeah, exactly.
And literally the lieutenant was so scared to confront the Sith Lords and be like, hey, can we wait till nightfall? That he literally was like, we're just going to go anyway. Right. And then Dez is like, we're all going to die. So he knocks out the lieutenant, and then they literally say like, we're going to attack at nightfall.
Right.
And then they end up attacking at nightfall.
Super successful.
And it's super successful. Yeah. Dez has a moment where like he literally gets flashbanged and can see everything perfectly, and just snipes all of the dudes that are on the top of the building that could have caused problems. Like, has this epic moment, right? And he actually takes his rifle from someone named Lucia, who's a soldier with him in the army. She ends up coming back in the third book, which we won't get into today. But like literally, Dez saves the day. And then they go back, and Ulabor, the lieutenant that he knocked out, is there marshals or whatever, MPs,
like the military police.
And Dez gets arrested, and like literally his soldiers were like ready to raise their weapons and kill Ulabor, try to rescue him, and Dez like shakes his head and goes no, let me go, don't worry about it. So Dez gets imprisoned, but apparently the tale of his sniping endeavor gets out, and so he actually gets pulled out of the pit by Kopej, who's this like chubby Twi'lek Sith Lord, who's actually Lord Khan, the leader of the Brotherhood of Darkness, is his right hand man.
Yeah,
and he basically goes like, "Hey, dude, like, how about you try being a Sith instead?"
Yeah,
you know, and
like then, a Sith Lord.
And Bane basically accepts. And he basically explains to Bane, like, these things you've been experiencing are actually symptoms of your connection to the Force, but you don't even know what you're actually capable of if you're given training. So then he goes to the Sith Temple on Korriban.
Yeah, Sith Academy.
The Sith Academy on Korriban, and he starts to train.
Which Korriban is the premier Sith Academy. There's different levels of Sith Academy, and they understand that Bane is either going to sink or sink or swim. And just because they know how powerful he could be. But that's part of the Sith, is like, if Bane fails, they don't care.
Yeah,
they'll
they
just
don't
move
care.
on.
They'll just move on. And they expect certain students to die and things like that. Because like so Bane rapidly gets powerful.
Yeah.
And he ends up in the dueling ring. So they do their training with these like training sabers on the roof of the temple. And he ends up, at the end of each training session, they get to challenge people. He ends up challenging this guy, a species called a McCurth. I'm not sure what his name is. I can't remember. But he ends up basically like losing. But when he's about to get cut down by the McCurth, he strikes out with the power of the dark side and literally just squashes this dude and like strangles the life out of him.
He murders he murders a classmate in front of everybody.
Yeah, murders a classmate in front of everybody. And like
intense.
And literally Bane's like, "Oh, I struck down a defenseless guy."
He feels super guilty.
And Kasim, who's the Blade Master, is like, he wasn't defenseless. He threw up a shield. You learn of like Drew Karpyshyn breaks down like all these concepts of like Force conflict. So like, if Luke and I are engaged in a lightsaber battle and I wanted to like use the Force on him, I'd have to break through a barrier that he has up, like a Force barrier that stops my ability to use those things against him. And he's like, he had a barrier up. He's like, Bane just literally ripped through it like tissue paper and destroyed this guy. So like, Bane is immensely powerful, right? That night,
but conscious.
That night, exactly. That night, he becomes aware of the fact that he actually killed his own father.
Yeah, by giving him a heart attack.
Yes, because he literally envisions a
night.
This
is so messed up.
When he was in the mines, in the barracks, where he's like literally envisioning squeezing his father's heart, and he's actually squeezing his father's heart through the Force, and he kills his father.
Right, and everyone thought he had a heart attack.
Yes. So Bane gets scared, pulls away from the Force, and just becomes a total wimp because he can't connect to the dark side at all. He ends up challenging, for whatever reason, challenging the most powerful student at the academy, which is a guy named Sirach, gets utterly demolished. Just gets the shit kicked out of him.
And like, again, incredibly violent. Like, it's uncomfortable to read Darth Bane. Legitimately, like, there's times when I have to take a break from it because it's super descriptive when it comes to like breaking bones.
And the sounds of the audiobook are like crunch, crunch.
Yeah,
like,
and it talks about like, I can't remember the specifics, but like Bane's leg being broken in half and just like incredibly painful, agonizing things that occur to these students just on behalf of one another. It's so cutthroat.
It'll be like Sirach slapped him on the arm and shattered his elbow. Then kicked him in the leg and cracked his femur. And then like it's literally
Bane
insane.
has no teeth by now because he's gotten so many teeth knocked out of his head.
And so he ends up
like broken facial bones and stuff, like incredible detail. Yeah.
So they use the one of the like Karpyshyn keeps dropping these little nuggets throughout the book, and one of the nuggets that he drops in the book is like that the Sith are still very much working it against each other. And so Cordis, who's the leader of the academy, doesn't like Kopej, the guy who brought Bane to the academy. So as soon as he finds out that Bane is like weak, he's like tells all the other masters like, don't teach Bane. Like, you're not allowed to teach Bane. Like, leave him alone. Like, train the other students, because it allows him to paint Kopej as like a loser, right? So literally, Bane has no choice once he heals in the Bacta tank. He has no choice but to go down to the archives, which is like this dark room in the bottom of the temple, where he can read ancient Sith Lord scrolls.
Which they've kept because they know some importance exists there. But essentially the modern day Sith masters have turned their back on ancient Sith. Everyone thinks, oh, like, why study ancient texts when you can study at the foot of a modern Sith Lord?
Yes.
And it even talks about how, like, the library full of these ancient texts, like, aren't even categorized into anything. It's just like random books everywhere that are like vaguely categorized, and it's like super unkept.
It's a total clusterfuck, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And it's because the current Sith Lords basically view the ancient Sith Lords as wrong about the way they did things. So Bane starts basically training in 3 ways. There's a defected Jedi who turned to the Sith. Her name is Githany. She essentially wants Bane's help to destroy Sirach. So she starts secretly training him in the bowels of the temple. Bane approaches Kasim. And Kasim says, can I get secret training from you?
And Kasim is the Blade Master, for anybody who doesn't know.
And he goes, can I have secret training with you? And he goes, sure, but why? Or he goes like, why? And Bane's like, because I want revenge. And then he's like, okay.
That's
Because he wants to make sure that Bane is actually going back to the dark side instead of pulling away from the dark side he did earlier. So he's training there. And then his third training is through the scrolls, which he's been reading. While he's reading this... like Githany and Kasim are making Bane super powerful again. But he's also reading these old scrolls and he's like, hold on a second. Like, what the hell is Lord Khan doing?
Right.
Like, this makes no sense. Like,
Darth Revan in particular.
Yeah, he finds a Darth Revan scroll in particular that makes like a loose reference to like the master-apprentice relationship and the way the dark side is supposed to work. And the dark side is all about the individual and not about the group. And Bane basically starts to piece together this puzzle. And it dawns on him, he's like, the Brotherhood's destined to fail.
Yes.
And this is the fundamental theological theme of the Bane trilogy, which is the Jedi are capable of being selfless and working towards the greater good. The Sith are physically and mentally incapable of that. So if they engage in all-out war, like arms against arms, the totality of our forces versus the totality of their forces, they are destined to win.
The Jedi.
Yeah. And Bane identifies, we cannot beat them this way.
It's not our style.
We have to beat them through individual power and secrecy and subterfuge and all these different things. So he's already starting to conceptualize this idea while he's training.
Which is super interesting because he's so low on the totem pole at the Sith Academy. Like, could not be lower.
Yes.
But he's gaining this immense power mainly because of the ancient texts and also just because his inherent ability to wield the Force.
Yes.
And what's happening too is like Githany is a student as well. Like she'll be in courses, think Hogwarts. Like she'll be in courses and they'll start to learn how to, use the Force in order to create like lightning storms. She'll be doing it and be like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then she'll go and teach Bane, and then Bane will supersede anything that she was able to do, even with proper training. So like,
and Githany's terrified.
Yeah.
She's like, holy shit, he's way
and then
more powerful
she
than us.
acts like, oh yeah, Bane, like, good job. This is how we all did it. Even though Bane has no clue how powerful he actually is.
Bane doesn't even realize yet that like he's vastly superseded everybody.
Yes.
So he finally challenges Sirach in the dueling ring and just obliterates him.
Yeah.
Like literally, he literally goes like, Sirach sent me to the back to tank, so I'm sending him to the back to tank. And literally Kasim steps in and like makes sure that he doesn't kill Sirach. Githany's all pissed off because Githany wanted him to kill Sirach.
Which Bane could have.
Which he could have, but he didn't. He literally didn't just because. He literally just didn't because almost out of respect for Kasim. Like,
because he's a good guy. He's a good guy still at this point. Well, he's kind of a good guy.
I disagree with you. I think he's given himself totally to the dark side because I think Githany's accusing him of that, but I don't think he's actually there.
Dude, Githany thought he was weak because he did not have the courage to actually kill him in the dueling ring, which he was supposed to do. And that's still where Bane is still holding on a little bit to his previous
I think
ideals.
you're right because he ends up actually telling her an Ambry on the beach like you were right.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. He was holding back. So Bane is slowly moving towards like an ultimate Sith Lord, but he's still being held back by some of his like natural tendencies as a human being, which is to be humane. So like that he's still like struggling, and that's one of the things that makes him weak.
Yes. So
from a dark side standpoint.
yes, but he's on the right path. Mm-hmm. But like
from a dark side.
So
standpoint.
from a dark side,
he's on the right path.
He's on the right
just a terrible.
path.
Yeah,
he's on the right path to becoming just a reprehensible human being. So he. So he literally goes to Cordis. He gets called to Cordis's office after
Lord Dumbledore.
Who's the head of the academy, and Cordis basically tells him, like, by the way, like, good job beating Sirach, but you're no longer allowed to read the text at the in the archives. Mm-hmm. And Bane gets pissed off and is like, why?
Yeah,
and he gets into this big argument with Cordis, and like then Bane starts to kind of hint at the fact that he doesn't agree with what they're doing. And so he goes like, I'm leaving. And he literally packs up his stuff and he goes out to the temples, to the Valley of the Dark Lords, which is like this big valley with all these ancient crypts of ancient dead Sith, right?
And this valley is surrounded by like palco bugs.
Yeah,
which if enough palco bugs like attack you, then they'll kill you.
Yeah,
like there's all of these like
wildlife.
Yeah,
and he doesn't even bring food.
Incredibly dangerous.
He doesn't even bring food. He just brings like hydration packs, basically. So like he goes on this
journey
because
he doesn't have a lightsaber yet.
Yes. Kasim's all pissed off because Kasim, the Blade Master, comes running into Cordis's office like, what the hell did you do? Like, Bane's our most powerful student. Now he's off running. Like, what'd you do? And Cordis is like, I didn't do anything. It wasn't my fault. You know,
because everyone thinks Bane is going to die.
Yes, but like Kasim actually sees like some fear in Cordis's face, and then it dawns on Kasim like, oh wait, Bane like really is like pulling away from this thing. So while Bane's out in the Valley of the Dark Lords, the things are getting worse for the Brotherhood on Ruusan.
Really quick too, Bane's goal to going into the Valley of the Dark Lords was to continue to learn under the feet of ancient Sith. So he thought by going to their old crypts and temples that he was going to be able to like evoke their spirits almost and be able to learn from them. Because
he had seen references to that type of dynamic taking place in the scrolls that he was reading. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, Exar Kun actually trained under the spirit of Naga Sadow. Like, this is what I can do too.
Which again is like one of the most like uncomfortable things about that, because it's almost like demonic in a way, like going to like certain areas and like learning from like evil spirits.
Well,
like it's super intense.
It's no different than Luke training under the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan.
It's light and dark. You're right.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just the dark side version of it. But like basically, things are going south on Ruusan. So Lord Khan calls for all the masters from the academy to come basically join the battle,
including students.
He gives them all lightsabers. They all get their own lightsabers. Yeah. Bane already had one because Kasim actually, after he beats Sirach, Kasim shows up to Bane and gives him his master's lightsaber that he killed. And it's crazy because Bane's like, whose lightsaber was this? And Kasim's like, this was my master's. And he asks him to tell him the story. And Kasim basically tells the story of the Rule of Two. He's like, my master was the greatest blade master in the history of Ryloth, and I learned everything I could from him. And then one day I realized like I was better than him and he had nothing that he could teach me. So I killed him.
Which was a challenge.
Yeah, he's like, I wanted to challenge myself. He kills him. And then Bane's literally like hearing the story, and Bane like, and again, Karpyshyn tells it from his perspective, and Bane's hearing the story and he's like, this is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Like this is the way
Good
it
job,
should work.
brother.
Like, great job, you know? and he actually thinks to himself at one point, like, what if Kasim could be his apprentice? Uh-huh. But he goes out to the wastes and basically discovers that the Jedi and the Sith have raided every one of these temples. There's nothing of value there. They're dead.
The temples are dead. Yeah.
And so Bane makes his way back, and he's basically starved into like a shell of himself. But what he gains in the journey is clarity. Mm-hmm. And like when he gets back to the temple, he's never been more sure of the fact that the Sith need to be destroyed. And he's like, we need to completely like redo this, but he still hasn't quite figured out like what the new Sith should look like. He just knows that what they're doing is wrong.
Which is exemplified by the fact that like even the Sith Academy are like to all their students, oh my gosh, like we need you guys in battle. You guys are all Sith Lords now. Enjoy. Thanks for your hard work. You guys did it. You know, and Bane like discovers that, and he's like, this is so watered down.
Stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he literally goes back into the temple and just immediately starts eating because he's starved.
Yeah.
And then he goes to sleep, and before he can get to sleep, literally Githany shows up in his room and is like, hey, come down to the archives with me. Turns out Githany's working with Sirach to potentially kill Bane. Bane hops up and follows her without his lightsaber. And he goes down to the archives, and then Sirach and his two brothers, who are these other Zabrak, they're all Zabrak, right? Uh-huh. So they're all Darth Mauls, basically. and they all take out their lightsabers and they're gonna try to kill Bane. And Bane like takes a gamble on the fact that Githany might be on his side still.
Yeah.
And Githany ends up throwing him his lightsaber, and then they end up having this epic duel where it's like Githany and Bane versus Sirach and his two brothers, and like Githany uses a lightsaber whip, so
Yes.
it's like literally like an energy beam.
That was
whip.
unexpected, right?
Yeah.
You did hear energy beam whip.
Yes.
Yep.
And Sirach uses a staff, and so he's got the double-sided lightsaber, and literally like Bane ends up killing one of the brothers, and then Githany ends up killing the other, and then suddenly Sirach surrenders and like gets down on his knees and is like, Bane, you are a true Sith, like I will serve you, like I will do whatever you ask. And then Bane basically goes like, those who beg for mercy are too weak to deserve it, and then just cuts his damn head off.
Yes.
And it's like
And Bane becomes Bane.
yeah, Bane, and then Bane's Bane. So then
He also inherits the title Darth.
Yes.
Then, correct.
There's this, yeah. Then there's this really cool concept that Luke just hinted at, where it's like basically all the Sith Lords go by Lord, but he's reading this scroll from someone called Darth Revan, and he actually asks Kasim, the Blade Master, he's like, why did we stop using the Darth title?
It sounds pretty dope.
Kasim basically goes, the Darth title was essentially an aggressive title.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you called yourself Darth Bane, you were saying I am the Sith, Sith Lord, and so they stopped using it essentially as part of the bastardization of the Sith, and when they became the Brotherhood of Darkness,
because it'd put a target on your back, and people would be pissed and be like, "Well, if you're Darth, then I'll try and defeat you," because nobody's Darth, right? So then the concept would happen where there was this great Sith Lord, and then 3 or 4 lesser beings would then defeat the Sith Lord just by overwhelming them, and then they'd be watered down because then there'd be 4 lesser beings instead of one great Sith Lord.
Yeah, and Bane pushes back on it with Kasim a little bit, but then eventually he relents because he knows it's just a lost cause.
Yeah.
So after killing Sirach, Bane goes running up on Cortus's office, who's the leader of the temple, and he basically says like, "You sent Sirach to kill me. What the hell, man?" And literally Cortus is like, "No, I didn't. Like, what are you talking about?"
Right.
And then he goes like, "By the way, we're all leaving tomorrow to go to Rusan, so like pack your shit, we're going." And Bane goes like, "I'm not going with you guys to Rusan.
Yeah,
like,
y'all are weak.
Like, screw you, y'all are weak."
And he's having this conversation in front of other students and stuff.
Because when he kicked open the door, all of the other instructors and students ran to Cortus's office to see what was going on. So then in front of all the Sith, he basically says like, "I'm going to take your ship and I'm leaving, and you're not going to stop me because you can't."
Yeah.
And then he turns and walks through all of them. And then literally Kasim, as he's walking away, goes like, "Lord Bane, don't leave." And he turns around and he goes like, "It's Darth Bane."
And then he steals his headmaster's ship and then
literally
goes off.
steals. Khan gives as a present to Cortus for before they leave to go to Rusan, gives him like a really fancy ship called the Valsin, and he straight up just steals it.
And nobody does anything.
And goes.
Yeah.
And so he ends up going to Lihan. And so the Brotherhood of Darkness, all of the masters, all the newly coined Sith masters, including Githany, they all run off to Rusan to join the battle, right? And things are continuing to go somewhat poorly there. Githany's starting to have some moments where like she's seeing Lord Khan and looking at him, and he's like kind of like this sickly, like kind of crazy.
He's
guy.
kind of losing it.
He's clearly losing his mind, and she's starting to think like, is Bane right about this? Like, this is weird. But like she's still kind of on the fence, and every time she gets close to bailing, Khan will like inflate with like charisma, and like he just kind of recaptures this, because Khan's gift is like he can do battle meditation. He's very much like he has control over the minds of the other Sith. Like he can motivate them and keep that. He's been like the one guy who's capable of keeping them together.
Which like we all like most Jedi, most Sith have like some unique characteristic, and like you said, like that is his characteristic. That is his special ability.
His number 2, Kopej, is kind of getting sick of him. Like they're all kind of getting sick of him, but every single time they get to the brink, Khan brings him back.
Pushes
together.
out with his mind a little farther every time.
Exactly. Bane goes to Lihan. On Lihan is an ancient Sith temple. There's this dope scene where he lands on the beach. And when he lands on the beach, a Rancor comes running through the bushes to kill Bane. And Bane just like reaches up and just dominates the Rancor's mind and rides it.
Yeah.
And then he actually searches through the Rancor's memories to find the
that
time that the Rancor saw the temple. And then
as
goes,
a child,
as a baby Rancor, And then he takes the Rancor towards the temple.
Uh-huh.
And literally goes into the temple, and he says go ahead. What were you
And
gonna
this
say?
temple's so dark and so full of dark side energy that the Rancor, it legitimately tries to veer off of course because it doesn't want to be next to the temple.
Yes.
And then Bane, through the
Reins
reins it in and like overpowers the Rancor's brain.
Yes.
And makes it continue to like stagger towards this temple.
Yes, it's really cool.
Or surrounding this temple, there are no like there's other than like short grass. There's no wildlife or like foliage.
Nothing
that
will grow
around the temple within like this ring because it's so evil.
And he literally says like, I feel a power here that is many times more strong than stronger than
it makes him
power on
lightheaded.
Korriban. It makes him lightheaded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes down into the temple and he ends up finding essentially like the temple's been raided, but he sees like his force sensitivity is like kind of bringing his attention to like a something
like
in the wall, a stone in the wall that's like kind of glowing a little bit. And so he ends up using the force on it, and it ends up revealing a cavity that he reaches into and grabs a holocron. And it ends up being Darth Revan's holocron, which is like super cool. Darth Revan is this ancient Sith Lord that, from those of you guys who played the Knights of the Old Republic games will recognize him. He famously like subjugated the Republic, but then got turned to the light side when he got nearly killed and his brain was wiped. But like he was at one point the Dark Lord of the Sith. So like he made this
absolute
holocron.
powerhouse.
As one of the most famous Sith Lords. Hopefully they make him canon one day. But Darth Revan's holocron essentially is a breakdown of the way he thinks the Sith should work, and it turns out Revan was very much a rule of two guy.
Yeah,
and he basically
that's true. Rule of two, man.
Yeah, and so Bane comes away from the holocron thinking like, I've got it.
Mm-hmm.
I need to completely destroy the Sith through a subterfuge, and I need to somehow disappear with me and an apprentice. And then I will embody the power and teach my apprentice everything. And one day when they become powerful enough to challenge me, if they defeat me, they can then take on a new apprentice. And there should only be two, no more, no less.
And Bane is willing for his apprentice to kill him.
Yes.
Like that would actually be almost
for the greater
ideal.
good of the Sith.
And then not only that, but it's not like like I'm Bane and I'm going to rule the galaxy. He's like, no, it may be generations of this before the Sith are back at top. And he's fine with that.
And his whole thing is like, if I die, that means I'm weak, which means I don't deserve
like
the mantle.
A true of rule of two guy.
Yeah, it's super ruthless, but in like a cool way. Well, so when the Brotherhood of Darkness shows up on Ruusan, Khan's like, "Where's Bane?" And they tell him what happened. Okay, well, he showed everybody up. It's this whole big problem. He basically, Githany starts
stole
having
my ship.
dreams. Remember, Githany has a dream of Bane coming to Ruusan and causing problems. So she actually confronts Khan and goes like, by the way, I had this dream. And then Khan's like, I'll deal with it. I'm going to send Kasim. So he sends Kasim, the Blade Master, to Lihan and basically says, ask Bane to join us. And if he joins us, great. But if he doesn't, kill him. And Kasim goes, he's not going to join us.
Yeah.
And he's like, then you have to kill him. And so he sends Kasim. Kasim ends up showing up at Lihan, and they end up in this epic lightsaber battle. And Bane,
envision two Sith Lords fighting in an ancient Sith temple.
Oh, dude, it's so epic.
It's so cool.
So epic, right? And so Kasim's using his double-bladed lightsaber, and Bane's actually beating him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the last second, Kasim dives into a side hall, which buys him just enough time for him to unscrew his lightsaber staff, and he goes into dual lightsabers.
And Bane is like, oh crap.
Shit. And one of the reasons why Bane was beating him is he had practiced time and time again against Kasim with his double-bladed lightsaber on the top of the temple. And so he goes to the double-bladed lightsaber and just starts messing Bane up, and Bane's screwed.
Yeah.
So Bane's advantage is he knows the layout of the temple. So Bane starts to kind of slowly work his way to the entrance of the temple. And then when he ends up landing on the entrance in the temple, and it's like imagine a pyramid, so there's a stone staircase. Kasim uses the force to push him off of the staircase. Bane like tumbles down and gets injured, but he's fine, and he lands on the ground. Kasim stands in the entryway and goes like, "You cannot run, Bane. Wherever you go, I will hunt you down and I will kill you. Better to make it a clean death now." While Kasim is talking, Bane gathers the power of the dark side and throws it at him. And Kasim protects himself, but the temple gets obliterated and basically crumbles down on Kasim and buries him alive.
Right.
It's just an incredibly epic moment. So Bane leaves and goes to Ambria, which is a planet that becomes very important over the next two books. And I love this like part of Star Wars lore. Ambria is like this desolate land, right? But
destructed.
there's a lake, a black lake. And the black lake is there because in the distant past, a Sith Lord engaged in some sort of ritual that she, I think, lost control of. And as a result, it like poisoned the world with the dark side. And then a Jedi Master ends up coming. I think his name was, I can't remember what the name of the master was.
Either.
But he shows up on this planet and does his own ritual, which traps all the energy of the dark side in this lake.
Just a nasty ass lake.
Yeah, and it's like a centuries-old story that really doesn't play any role in the story. It's just a cool story.
Right. And Bane sets up shop right next to the lake.
Bane sets up shop on the beach of this lake.
He's like, this is nice.
That has the power of the dark side in it, right? And it's not like he can tap into it because it's like trapped in there by this like spell, but like this is where he decides to hang out. He sends a message drone to the Sith that basically says like, it's a peace offering that says I'm gonna be.
He acted like he was broken down because he had defeated his master.
Yeah, after killing Kasim, I've killed Kasim. I've realized I was wrong. I'm gonna come to Rusan and I'm going to help you guys. By the way, here's a token of my goodwill. This is a ritual I found. It's called the Thought Bomb, and it's delivered to Khan. And Khan's reading the Thought Bomb, but it's like a description of the Thought Bomb that leaves out an important detail. And essentially what the Thought Bomb is like when the Sith Lords combine their power, they can unleash an explosion that actually destroys every Force-sensitive being that's nearby. But he leaves out the part that it will consume the people who do the ritual as well. And so he gives it to Khan as like, this is a weapon you can use against the Jedi. And Khan, when he's reading it, kind of has his suspicions like this might kill us too.
Yeah.
So like Bane understands that like they're only going to use it if they're absolutely desperate, which we'll get to. But like Khan basically goes like, this is great, but we still need to kill Bane. And Khan's like who am I going to send? And Githany goes like, I'll do it.
What up?
So Githany goes to...
Because Githany and Bane have this like romantic tension.
Yeah. And when they're hanging out in the archives, they're like touching each other and getting like feelings and stuff.
Massaging shoulders, not like touching each other.
They're not like going to second base, but like they are definitely touching each other, right? So when Githany shows up by Lake Nath,
you're allowed to show your shoulders at the Sith Academy. Let's just say that.
It's a little different than the Jedi Order, but if they do hint at the fact that Githany was doing a lot of fucking when she was with the Jedi. Remember?
Oh yeah,
that was the whole thing. So anyway, Bane and
this is very much Disney material.
I don't think this is ever going to make its way to canon.
No,
not in Disney. So Githany ends up like showing up, and Bane like picks her up and kisses her. And when he does, like he can taste that there's poison on her lips. And it's like rockwort venom is what it's called that he tastes. And Bane knows the poison's there and he's like leaning into it because it's making him happy because he's like, Githany gets it. She understands that secrecy and subterfuge is the way. Like I might be able to have this girl be my apprentice. Like this could be great.
He was like so happy that Githany was trying to kill him.
Yeah. So he's pleased. And so he also knows he can defeat the poison. So he like uses the Force to burn the venom out of his body. And he's like because he like looks inward, identifies the poison, and like kills it,
but not outwardly. Like he's acting like he doesn't know it's there.
Yeah, he's outwardly he's like telling Githany everything's fine, and then he's like, "I'm going to be coming soon," and Githany turns around and leaves.
Yeah.
Okay? So at that point,
okay, babe, see you in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, babe, see you
enjoy.
So Bane ends up succumbing to the symptoms of a different poison that was hidden underneath the rockwort venom,
which made him even happier.
But
he was dying.
But now he's screwed. So he's like in the throes of death, like dying. And
this is
like,
where it gets
like,
super dark.
Yeah, and he's like
uncomfortably dark.
He's like, this sucks. Like, oh man, but like, good job, Githany. Like, that's great. But he gets on this land crawler and he starts driving because he's
legitimately dying.
He knows of an ancient healer, or an old healer that lives out in this place. And so he's on this like this land crawler, but he's slowly succumbing to the symptoms of his poisoning. And at one point, he ends up crashing the land crawler. And when he crashes, this scavenger and his two sons or three sons?
I think two.
Two sons. His scavenger and his two sons like come up to him.
This is where it's super hard to like. I like had to take breaks listening to this part. Like as a new father, like hearing this part of the book like kind of jacked me up a little bit.
It's intense.
Yeah.
But like literally, Bane ends up killing the kids and the dad and like drinking in their fear and pain and suffering to recharge himself enough to make it to the healer's camp.
He kills the dad last because he knew that he could feed off the anguish of a father witnessing the death of his children.
Yes, exactly.
Which is just so intense.
It is very, it's very intense. But he ends up getting to the camp, but then the healer goes like, I'm not healing you. Because he's like, I don't like your brand, pal. He's right in the middle. This healer is a force user that's right in the middle of the spectrum, and his power comes from the earth, and like it's very like ethereal, right? So like he ends up saying like, no, I'm not going to do it. But Bane can sense his daughter basically in the tent. And so he basically uses the force to pull the daughter out of the tent and dangles her over a boiling pot of stew. And then finally, Khalib is like, fine, I'll heal you.
Khalib's the healer.
So Khalib, the healer, ends up healing Bane. So Bane then shows up on Ruusan. And when he shows up on Ruusan...
Bane allows Khalib to live, which is important.
Yeah, an important concept. Like, Bane is not a believer in killing for sadistic pleasure. Like, he'll only kill if it serves a purpose.
Correct.
So he ends up letting Khalib survive, and he goes back to Ruusan. And when he shows up to Ruusan, Khan's having like a war room like meeting with all the Sith Lords,
stoked.
like getting everybody stoked. And Bane like comes and like just walks into the room and goes like and sits down at the table and goes like continue what you're doing. And then
everyone's like, oh my gosh,
as
how is
Khan
Bane
is
here?
talking, like Bane ends up like slapping the table and like, that's like bullshit. You guys should be doing this instead. And then he ends up pitching them a different ritual, which is like this like lightning storm ritual. And so he goes out and he uses this lightning storm ritual with all the Sith Lords that literally like obliterates the forest that the Jedi are hiding in, and the Jedi flee out into the open, and then the Sith attack them.
Yeah.
Now, the only important context here is there are 300 Jedi Knights and Masters in a fleet that is blocked out by a Sith blockade, and that's the reinforcements for the Army of Light. So the Sith are in a commanding position, but only because they're blocking reinforcements from showing up. After Bane performs the ritual, as all the Sith are going to fight the Jedi in the valley, Bane goes back to the camp, calls the Sith fleet, and goes, engage the Jedi fleet. And then the admiral's like, are you sure? Because our blockade's going to break if we do that. And he's like, yep, engage the Jedi fleet. So literally, as soon as they engage the Jedi fleet, the Jedi sneak all their drop ships down and then disengage and jump to hyperspace. Nothing literally the Jedi don't suffer any losses. And then while the Sith are fighting all the Jedi on the ground, here come the Jedi reinforcements, and they deliver just a crushing defeat to the Sith.
Right.
And
as the Sith were this close to winning. Yeah,
close to winning. Not really winning, but winning against the groups that were down there because the Jedi are still in
Correct.
reinforcements.
Yeah,
that was one of the things that like Bane was Bane's like, you're not actually going to win. Like,
right.
You can win here, but you're never going to actually stop. Like Bane saw the flaw in it the whole time. But like the Sith suffer this absolute crushing defeat. And in that moment, they're so helpless that Khan turns to the thought bomb. And there's an important moment too, by the way, and this is a moment that I've mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, but there's a moment when the Jedi reinforcements are just messing up the Sith.
Yeah.
Where Khan is looking at the battlefield from above, and he's like, we could win this. But he sees all the Sith Lords like retreating. All the Sith Lords that were screwed as the reinforcements came in.
Right.
Rather than coming together and fighting, they devoted to what Sith always do, which is self-preservation, and they're all retreating. And he literally identifies like, we could have still won, but we can't because they're Sith. And Khan gets super discouraged because he realizes like he really is the only thing holding this group together, and it really is very brittle. And so that's when he goes like, all right, we're going to use the thought bomb. And so he tells all the other Sith Lords like, we're going to go down into the caves, we're going to bait the Jedi to come in, and then we're going to unleash the thought bomb on them, right? So at this point, a couple of key characters divert, right?
Correct.
So like as they're going down to the tunnels, Bane goes back to the camp, but Cordis, the leader of the temple, he also leaves and goes back to the camp to talk to Bane, and basically goes like, hey, I know you're trying to take Khan's spot. Mm-hmm. Like, let me serve with you. And
he like tries to serve under Bane. Like, that's how powerful Bane is.
Yeah, and he's like an old, skinny, like old Sith Lord, and Bane just literally chokes the life out of him. Just like
kills him.
Just kills him. Just chokes the life out of him, right? Kills him in cold blood there. Kopej is like, screw this. I don't want to die in this stupid ass ritual. I want to die in a lightsaber fight. So he goes out with the Sith armies, like the actual soldiers and stuff, like the gun holding people out on the surface and fights off because the army of light sees them all disappearing into the caves. And so they go to attack
because they know that the Brotherhood of Darkness is up to like no good.
Yeah,
right?
they know
so
that
they
they're up
want
to
to
no
get
good.
down into the caves with the Brotherhood of Darkness before they can unleash whatever.
Well, they don't know
good.
they don't know they're going to unleash anything yet. They're just attacking.
But they,
Kopej is
but they
what
can,
reveals
but they
it.
want to get down there before. That's the reason why Hoth is following them, because he wants to put them on their heels and not give them enough time to regroup.
That's a great point. Yeah. So they immediately attack them in the tunnels. They destroy the armies that are outside the tunnels, and when most of them end up just surrendering.
Yeah.
And while the soldiers are surrendering, it's super bloody. And like they actually say in the book, like the last battle of Ruusan was really not that bloody. But Kopej, who's the chubby Twi'lek, who's Khan's second in command, he ends up going like I don't want to die or I don't want to be imprisoned.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you what Khan's doing if you promise to kill me.
And that's directly to Farfalla.
And Farfalla we haven't introduced yet, but he's basically the Jedi who brought the reinforcements. He's kind of like Hoth's equal, but they definitely are two different. Like Hoth's like an old school warrior, and Farfalla's like kind of like a political, like fancy.
He's a little bit dainty.
He's a little bit dainty,
but he's a badass on the battlefield. But he'll do it with like flowing hair and like a cape
and a gold breastplate.
Yeah,
like that kind of thing.
Very
like,
flamboyant,
very High Republic vibes, right? So literally, he ends up being like, "Okay, fine. Like I will kill you if you tell me what Khan's doing." And Kopej goes, "He's about to unleash this thought bomb." So Farfalla kills Kopej in battle because Kopej actually stands up and fights again before he dies. And then basically Farfalla reports to Hoth like what the situation is, and Hoth goes, "We have to force him to use it.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't use it here, he'll use it somewhere else. We got to force him to use it, but we also have to make sure that we show that there's enough Jedi that it's worth using." So he ends up enlisting 100 Jedi. He asks for volunteers. Every single Jedi volunteers. So he picks the 100 oldest Jedi who have been on Ruusan the longest.
Yeah.
And they march down into the tunnels and basically confront Khan as he's doing the ceremony. Now, as he's doing the ceremony, Githany goes, "Oh, this is crazy. I don't want any part of this."
Not good.
So she finally breaks away and starts running up the tunnels to get away.
Yeah.
Khan ends up seeing Hoth, and he counts how many Jedi there are. And when he sees clearly that it's such a large amount that they have no choice but to use the weapon, claps, sets off the bomb. All of the Jedi and Sith die. Githany actually thinks she's going to get away, but then she ends up getting like vaporized, and it was like all of their spirits end up getting trapped in this orb in the middle of the tunnel
and tormented. So
and
like
tormented.
The idea behind this is, and what's so bad about this is they don't die when they get trapped in this orb. Like their souls essentially do not die. Their souls are forced together in this like
mess
realm
because they said their consciousnesses have been shredded.
Yes,
too. Like it's different pieces.
And
of
it's
their
just
consciousness.
anguish of light and dark being forced to like collide for eternity. It's super jacked up.
So this is an important little thing in extended Legends lore. So the original Jedi Knight game. So those of you guys who played, there was a game called Dark Forces, which introduces us to Kyle Katarn, which is this guy who used to be an Imperial soldier in the time after the Return of the Jedi. Then there's a game called Jedi Knight where Kyle Katarn becomes a Jedi. And in that game, they introduce us to the planet Ruusan and a thing called the Valley of the Jedi. And the Valley of the Jedi is literally the Jedi end up building a shrine, which we learn about in the next book. They build a shrine on Ruusan to basically say thank you to the people that sacrificed their lives on Ruusan to destroy the Sith.
Yeah.
But this big orb, and it's like they say it's like 4 meters tall and 3 meters wide. It's like this big orb. They say that in the book. This orb essentially is it becomes a force nexus.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kyle Katarn ends up getting his connection to the Force by essentially connecting with the orb at one point in the future, which is cool because then later on in Jedi Outcast, he turns away from the Force, but then he has to go back to the Valley of the Jedi again and he jumps in it again. But like it's kind of like a weird kind of connection between the Ruusan storyline from Darth Bane and the Jedi Knight series. But anyway, essentially the book ends with Bane, while he's working his way back to his ship. Essentially, he goes to the camp. But before he goes to the camp, he's walking to the camp because he wants to go to the camp to just grab some supplies and some shit before he leaves the planet, right? And the rest of the Jedi have evacuated because they wanted to get as far away from the thought bomb as possible to avoid them getting hit by it. He ends up locating essentially a small force-sensitive girl that the Jedi had recruited to join them, but their ship got shot down. And she ended up falling to the earth and getting saved by a bouncer, which is one of these creatures that live on the planet. Just imagine a big, fluffy ball that floats.
That's very emotional.
Yeah.
Usually very good.
And telepathic.
And so this bouncer had, in a sense, like saved her as she fell. And then they became close because the bouncer had lost all of its family as well. And it's super eerie because the bouncers typically are like super positive and very good. Like when the Jedi showed up, the bouncers would actually go around and like make them feel better through like telepathic wavelengths. Like when people would be dying on the battlefield, the bouncers would go and hover over them and calm them down as they were dying.
Yeah.
But then what's kind of messed up is through these Sith rituals, the bouncers were driven insane and they became super negative and they started attacking everybody, including the Jedi.
Yes.
So the big deal was as the Jedi were trying to go and find survivors, they saw a bouncer hovering over this little girl. The bouncer was actually being close, like being helpful to the little girl. And they see it and kill it in cold blood because they think it's evil.
So then Xana goes crazy.
Xana's the little girl.
Xana is the little girl. She ends up lashing out in anger at the two Jedi that killed this bouncer and snaps their necks with the Force.
Just immediately.
Like, just kills them. So then Bane basically walks up on her, sees the two dead Jedi, sees the little girl, and goes like, clearly she's super powerful. And basically they have a conversation, and Xana's like, okay, I'll follow you.
Yeah.
And that essentially is the end of the book. And like the book 2 basically picks up with Bane getting to the camp. So like essentially like the entire book is essentially Bane becoming a Sith, identifying that the Sith are wrong in their teachings, learning the proper way to be a Sith, and then destroying the Sith Order.
Correct.
And then in the background, we're basically told the story of the new Sith Wars and everything about the Brotherhood of Darkness versus the Jedi. It was a very, very good book.
It was an awesome book.
And there's so many more interesting concepts for us to get into. I thought by far the most interesting concept of the book, though, was just the Bane clearly identifying what drives the light and the dark.
Yes.
And understanding the best version of the dark and the best version of the light, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Because essentially, you guys got to understand, Palpatine in Order 66 was the culmination of a thing called the Grand Plan. The Grand Plan began with Bane killing the Sith and essentially instituting their current system, the Rule of Two, and understanding that subterfuge is the way to destroy the Republic.
It's the only way.
Which culminates after 1,000 years with Plagueis and Sidious and their plans to orchestrate the Clone War and to overthrow the Republic. It's literally this whole journey. And Plagueis does an amazing job of telling the story of what happens in between. But the Bane books basically tell the beginning of the grand plan. And like, again, we highly recommend you read it. Obviously, if you listen to this, you have a good idea of what happened in it. Did you have any other major takeaways from the book?
No, dude, that was it. We hit like the small little nuggets as we talked about the plot line of Bane. And we're going to be doing the second book pretty soon here. Like, we're both pretty far in it.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. We appreciate your support as always, and we will see you next week.
Thanks a lot.